r/AskReddit. Serious, drug dealers of Reddit. Have you ever called CPS on a client? If so, what's the story? So, I'm only posting because I have been clean and sober for 3.5 years now, and anything I say I have already been convicted for, and I've officially finished all of my legal issues. I have never officially called Child and Family Services, but I had this one mother who used to constantly call me for meth, and I had never been to her house before. I was a bit of a sketch bag and didn't trust anybody, but after a few months I built a relationship with her where I felt at ease going to her house. When I went to go drop some off, it was child tax day. I never knew she was a mother, normally not an issue for me. I could not care less. I walked into the house and the smell was unbelievable. Cigarettes, sweat, shit and piss. There was broken glass on the floor, 12-inch burn circles on the floor, poop on the floors. The TV was smashed. The bathroom door was literally torn off, and in the hallway, I has seen a little toddler that was walking around with no diaper on. He had his own poop all over him. He was so malnourished he was grey. The mother came to give me her money and I took the bag of meth I had, put it in my pocket, and I told her to buy some diapers for her kid. I told her that she would have to find her dope somewhere else, and walked away. A good friend of mine who had always tried to help me out was a social worker, and I told her who she was and where she lived, and gave her some details so she could make a final decision. I'll always remember that kid. The last I heard, he had been taken away, and the mother was in jail. I wish him the best of luck in this cruel world. Edit. Thank you all so much for the support. I didn't expect for this to blow up as much as it did. I love and appreciate all of you. I used to sell weed, X, and K around 20 years back, and I had a regular that would come to see me like clockwork every weekend. He seemed like an okay guy, excluding the drugs of course, but I can't really criticize here because I was a dealer. And after a while his pickups turned into 5-minute chats, and then to 30-minute stays. During a convo he let slip that he had a son, a toddler, and that he looked after him every weekend. And that when he was at my joint picking up his kid was in the car, the kid was in the back seat. He had a high-ace minivan windowless the whole time. And not only that, but because he didn't want to share his single bed with his kid and risk getting it urinated in, he made his kid sleep in the van outside. But it's okay, because it was locked and parked in the backyard, so the kid was safe. As soon as he let it slip, he was done as a customer. I told him to get pho and never come back on the threat of a severe beating. He threatened to rat me to the cops. I told him that my suppliers saw me as a decent source of income and wouldn't take it very well. He left. It rocked me so hard I felt almost concussed. I honestly couldn't process how sterile and casual he was about it all, and I knew I had to tell CPS. So I called anonymously and said I lived on his street and could hear the kid crying from the van at night every weekend, and that I had seen him incoherent and smelling of weed during the day. I never saw him again, and I don't know what happened to either him or his son. But it has stuck with me all this time, and I feel responsible for his actions in part because he did these things in pursuit of his drugs. I eventually stopped dealing and got my shit together, and the way I felt about this, and the realization that my actions affected people far further from me than I though, was a huge part of it. Nothing changes the fact that I contributed to that child's neglect and abuse though, willingly or not. It makes no difference, and it's only one of the shitty ugly things I've done that I have to live with. Reddit. I am overwhelmed. I never expected this much support, much less any, for simply answering a question and expressing my regrets over a poor life decision. Gildings, DMs of caring support, and an inbox full of positivity have made me feel humble. Please forgive me if I don't answer your questions. My heart is heavy with memories, and I have to shake it off as I am due to pick my boys up from school. Not sure if this counts, but in the late 1990s, I used to sell reefer part-time while I was in college. One of my regular customers turned his sister onto me. She called for a delivery. No big deal. I went there one time. She had 3 little kids, like a couple toddlers and an infant. Her house was full of cockroaches. I was disgusted. I called CPS, not because of the drugs and babies, but because of how fucking filthy that house was. It caused a lot of problems for her and her boyfriend. They were in the system for a long time. Not sure how it all turned out, but duck that woman. Dealer? Check. Called CPS on a client? Check, it counts. I'm not a drug dealer, but my brother was years and years ago. He said what made him stop dealing was when a mother came to buy drugs from him. She tried giving him food stamps, back when they came kinda like cash, not on a card, and her kids were in the backseat crying because they were so hungry. They looked like they weren't regularly fed. He told her to duck off and buy some food for her kids. After that he didn't sell anymore. I'm not sure if he called CPS on her, but it did make him turn his life around. The little bit that he had after he stopped selling. It's kind of weird to see drug dealers having etiquette, but you know what? Duck it. Good on your brother for having morals. This story really messed with my emotions. Goddamn. My deceased sister told me a story how she went to her friend's home, in a trailer park, to sell her some weed. Knew the girl a little from school. Said it was a garbage pit inside. There were so many cockroaches they huddled in groups on the walls. It was like a horror movie when you turned on a light. Her friend was embarrassed and started crying. Took her to her kid's room and lifted up the mattress. Hundreds of roaches scattered. My sister started crying too and felt so bad for her, but was totally grossed out. So she was like, sorry, but I gotta get out of here. Didn't take her money, wrestled with it for a while because they were schoolmates, but once she figured out the girl was a prostitute and doing heroin, she called CPS. They gave the kids to the grandparents, and Mama's still being a dope horse 15 years later. I called CPS on a neighbor while at the same time selling weed, but they weren't clients. They just beat and neglected their kids. My GF at the time followed up with them regularly, but nothing ever came of it. They never even did a home visit as far as I know, and they were evicted like a week later. I feel like this is the unspoken commonality far too few people are willing to admit. I never dealed, just loved my friends, and 'tis still hits too close to home. My brother's wife severed his parental rights, then left their baby cooking in a hot car till they arrested her. She got the charges dropped just to save her CNA license. She's a hossa beast. Last time I visited, she said the rabbit ears antenna was the government spying on her. How's the kid doing? All their kids are naturally a bit off. Psychopath genes run in the family. He's like 12 now. I suppose he's okay. He's a cute bugger. I don't know if it counts, but my old neighbor friend that sells weed and pills did on some other neighbors he smoked with because they kept leaving their kids unsupervised or undersupervised. Their youngest would walk over to his house constantly if they couldn't find their parents because they expected them to be there toking it up. But much of the time they weren't there either, so he would end up watching the kid for a bit, which became too much because my friendly neighborhood dealer was a senile besides being a businessman that just wanted to smoke in peace. So he called, which started a whole new drama because one of his clients told them that he called. Last I heard, the mom moved all her kids to another state and the dad of the youngest kid moved to a separate state in the other direction. But that family was full of drama. I felt so sorry for the kids. I also called once on them because I saw the inside of their house and witnessed the lack of adult supervision. Nothing came of either of our calls. Wasn't me but my dead friend whose trap I was at. Jay came in to swap food stamps and groceries for crack with her 3-year-old daughter. Smoked all the rock right there with daughter next to her. That was when I kinda realized it's a ducked up world. There are a lot of people trying to hold this world together. Don't give up on it. I called the dope hook to re-up one night. I wanted to ride along because of the amount, so they said they'd pick me up at the homies. Pulls up with a baby in the middle seat like a 3-5-year-old little girl. Car is trashed and the child is covered in dirt. The hook is out there like they've been up way too long. Out there acting ducking sketchy. So I'm on the mission just looking at my phone, hitting up my people and killing time staring at my screen. We pull up at the spot. They run in and leave the baby with me. I look down and notice she's covered in cigarette burns all down her legs. My heart instantly broke. Hook jumps back in and passes the stash my way. They start jerking the baby by the arm because she was standing up and playing around. The moment they let me out at my spot, I knew what I had to do. Grabbed the license plate and called the Crime Stoppers number and dropped the abuse tip. Less than a week they were locked up. I literally walked away from the scene that week. Been away from that noise for over 2 years. Clean now. But I'll never forget that baby having burns on her legs. Edit. Spell checked. As a homeless dealer, I drifted from house to house just crashing short term to avoid awkward issues with friends and their families. All were accommodating but one. This one is particular, bought from me constantly, and every time I'd go over there the place would be worse than before. I'm talking a scraped RV and Lincoln in the front yard. Car parts and power tools just sitting around the entire house. And cigarette butt piles in all corners. I came to the conclusion that I was being taken advantage of due to what I was selling and the position I was in, so I stopped crashing there, ghosted them for about 2 months, and started to clean up my life. After my friend reached out to me, I came over to visit and meet his new girlfriend. I show up to this death trap and there's 3 kids in the house completely unattended while everyone is in the basement shooting up. My friend proceeds to tell me that her and the kids needed a place to stay, and me being in a way better place with an actual apartment to myself, I said yes. After dropping them off, I had to go back to his place to get my wallet, and I show up to cops and a couple of women in suits looking for his girlfriend's children, and my friend is frantic trying to tell me not to say anything, which I didn't because that meant cops would be in my home where there was definitely a closet full of pipes and bongs. I was questioned by CPS about the quality of life the kids might have had in the house, gave my very honest statement, and was sent on my way. I returned home and had to very coldly tell that woman and her kids that they couldn't stay. I cut ties with all of them after that and heard later down the road that one of the kids cut 2 fingers off with scissors and she lost custody. To all the kids out there who have drug addicted parents and a horrible environment, you can call CPS and report your own parents. And end up in the foster care system, which can, believe it or not, be even scarier. I know a pediatrician whose patient was neglected by the mom so much he was truant for years, but they wouldn't give her even an ounce less of custody. Eventually the dad complained enough that CPS actually got off their butt and looked into it. She had taken in another kid, a foster kid, just for the money the state pays you for taking one in. And she literally just locked the foster kid in a room and slid food under the door. She didn't even let the poor foster kid go to the bathroom. Kid had to piss and shit in a corner. That's what it took for the dad to get primary physical custody of his kid after years of truancy on the mom's days. The craziest part, they still let her have every other weekend unsupervised with her biological son and let her keep the foster kid. This is kind of the reverse of the situation, but on topic, my mother was a meth addict turned dealer. She was cooking it in the house doing deals. It was a trap house. She was so worried about CPS she pulled us out of school. There was no food. The house was in disrepair. Addicts walked in and out all the time. Me and my sister had enough. My brother was only 4 at the time and we couldn't take care of him. We flushed her stash and she went ballistic. We called our aunt to get us and we went to her house and called CPS on her. She didn't even know we were gone when they raided the house. She blamed my father and his family for calling them. She got 5 years probation for felony possession of Class A narcotic, felony charge of distribution, felony charge of production, 3 charges of child negligence, 3 charges of child abuse, and 2 charges of educational negligence. She got 5 years probation and had to take parenting classes. She got clean and still is, but she acts like it wasn't so bad and I didn't have a problem until she was dealing. I still kinda hate her for what she done and I'm not sure I will ever fully forgive her. Edit. Thank you all for the kind comments. It means a lot to me. Really, it definitely upsets me knowing so many people have gone through this and still are. And thanks for the gold. I've never gotten any metal on Reddit besides a silver for a joke. I was good friends with a dealer and went with him to make a delivery. It was one of his regulars, but my first time going with him. House wasn't bad or anything, but while we were dropping off the stuff she whipped the shit out of a toddler with the metal end of a fly swatter and the dog too, just because they were running around playing. A dealer friend saw nothing wrong with it. I couldn't deal with that, so cut ties with him and called CPS on her. Throwaway. A mother wanted to buy 70 perks at once before a family trip. She had a 9-year-old in the car. Called CPS on the beach. Never will I ever deal you drugs in front of your kids. Duck. Drop them off. We didn't call, but we should have. My girlfriend in high school sold weed. Not even something hard. But we knew a 10-year-old kid whose mom bought from her regularly. She was using money for her kids' medication and food. But the worst part was that the kid was 10 years old and was on the same drugs as his mom. Weed was not her drug of choice. Just something in between. He smoked cigarettes and had asthma. The mom would joke about how, oh, I bet those cigarettes don't help, hahaha. It's one of those things you look back on with adult hindsight and really wish you could back in time. As a 16-year-old kid I knew it was severely ducked, but that was just the situation most kids in my area were in. And with the groups I ran with back then, no one wanted to be known as the snitch. Really wish I could go back and do something. I saw that kid about a year ago at the bus terminals. Only reason I recognize him immediately is because 10 years later he hasn't grown at all. He looks 12 and 50 simultaneously. He's still running in the same groups. I imagine it's hard to break out of that when your only parent is best friends with every dealer in the neighborhood. Years ago my friend was a dealer and had to cut off this woman we knew because she brought her 5-year-old daughter to his apartment and started having the daughter roll her a joint. How old? I'm just picturing a toddler rolling up. That's pretty mild compared to other comments. On another side of the coin, I was taken by CPS and lived with my grandparents for quite a while when I was a kid because my mom was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and she would always bring me to parties at her dealer's house. I was 3-4 years old and had pretty bad childhood trauma PTSD. I pulled up to this woman's house. I was 19 at the time. She was a regular and often asked if I had any coke. I was strictly a marijuana dealer. When I walked into her house, she had 2 babies, twins, female dealer here. When I asked to use the bathroom, she said she didn't have running water due to money issues. There was a 5-gallon bucket in the bathroom to pee and poop in. This bucket was extremely full, not to mention the overflowing trash cans and tied off trash bags in the living room. I couldn't believe how gross her house was. I panicked. I called CPS and told them I was a family friend. I drove my car down the road a little and waited for the cops to show up. I watched them pull the woman out of the house in cuffs. She turned out to have heroin in her house. I still wonder about those twins today. I'm never clicking on another thread like this again. Duck this world. Agreed. Coronavirus is nothing compared to this ugly garbage. I was the buyer in this instance, but I remember meeting up with this chick for the first time. She brought her kid in a stroller, on foot. She had never met me before. I got her number from a friend. I texted her after I got my shit and told her that it could have gone really bad if she were meeting someone with a little less scruples. She didn't have anywhere else to turn as it was the only way she could put food on the table. I ran into a kid that was listed as a missing person at a dealer's house one time. I didn't like it, but I dropped dime on that dude. He was a ducking creep and I'm like 99% sure he was ducking that kid. Maybe a 30 or 40 year age difference between them. The kid was maybe 15-16. I don't really know what came of it as we ran in totally different circles. But I never saw dude again, so I hope the kid got out of that situation. Another guy paid me an oxy to do his daughter's homework, take her to school. I eventually called CPS on them, but I don't think anything came of it. The kid would need to get ready for school, and in one bathroom her mom would be nodding out on the toilet and in the other her father would be smoking crack, peeking out the windows. Sad ducking situation. She turned out okay though last I saw. It's an ugly ducking world. I've never called, but I wanted. A meth user that lives around the corner from me buys my pot and brings her 11-year-old son with her everywhere she goes. The poor boy is so scrawny, with a hollow look in his eyes. I've been in their house once and it was trashed. Clothes, most likely stolen, were covering every inch of floor, in some places piled up to my chest. I'm 5'3". They have around 6 cats that are kept inside without a litter tray, so I have reason to call RSPCA. What gets to me most is this kid has to comfort his mother when she's tweaking out paranoid as duck and plants seeds in his head that people are after them. Let's just say I don't sell to her anymore. Plus she talks my ear off too much. Like, shut up lady, I have customers waiting. I did many years ago. When I pushed, I did not deal in hard drugs, only THC, MDMA, psychedelics. While I was at this woman's house because she was not only a client but also a girlfriend of one of my best friends. So I was there often enough to see him. I consistently found myself and anyone else at the house left alone with the child. It seemed if anyone showed up, she would sneak out. Come to find out she was doing methadone with the upstairs neighbors. And who the hell knows what else. I hate to know who that child was ever left alone with. She had been an on again off again drug addict. Pills, heroin, Meth addict. Many times I witnessed that she would watch her toddler put cigarettes in her mouth from the ground, which I would take away from the baby, and she would laugh and say that it's not a big deal. I rode in her car a few times. I was a smoker at that time as well as her. I would get out of the car to light up, and she would tell me that I could smoke in the car, but I refused because of the child in the back seat. When I was around, I would try my best to kind of steer her away from the child when she wanted to have a cigarette. It is something very specific that began to steer me clear of any tobacco use. She had a bug problem in her house, and she would spray bug killer on every single one of her daughter's toys to keep the bugs off of them. I explained to her that her baby chews on her toys and bug killer can seriously harm her, and she again told me that it's not a big deal. She has seen her baby put worse things in her mouth and that it will toughen her up. I had enough. I am the oldest of 9 kids, and I nannied for several families for over a decade aside from mothering my own siblings. I know that a child can handle a lot, but there are so many things that she was doing that kept ringing off the danger bells in my head. I knew that if the child got sick or even died because of her carelessness, I would feel directly responsible for not doing anything about it. If you see something, say something, especially when it involves a child. My goal was not to have her child taken from her, and she never did, but for someone with authority to keep tabs on the child. I could not stand to be around her anymore, and it is within my nature to take on a caretaker role. But that relationship I had with those people was seriously damaging my mental state. I had nothing but fear and sorrow for that little girl. I lost a best friend by doing this, but the kid was worth more than a friend who could not see what his woman doing right in front of him. Where they are now is even more sad, but I can't bring myself to dive into that. Late to the party, but I once called CPS on a drug dealer who was supplying some boys I knew, age 12, 13, 14 and 14, with free ice to get them addicted, and was also at one point harboring them in her house while they were on the run from police. Dealers who deal to kids are the scum of the earth. My first boyfriend sold weed strictly to 12-year-olds. Not even his friends in high school, just 12-year-olds. We only dated for a few months, and that's only one of many ways he was a piece of shit person. So it wasn't me, but I have a feeling it was the downstairs neighbor. When I was little, I lived with my mom, who for the last half decade was blowing up kitchens in San Antonio with my dad cooking meth. In this 2-story apartment, my dad had skipped out on us, and it was my mom, little sister, and me. Often when my mom would like to get high, she'd lock us in my room where we'd sleep on the floor and watch VHS movies on this old box TV so that way she could go smoke meth in peace. Well, my mom and my aunt would often smoke together and leave us and my cousin unattended, and I guess the guys that would give me food downstairs when my mom wouldn't got sick of it and called the cops. Because one day we were locked in our room watching TV when out of nowhere these guys bust in and we hear screaming. They come into our room and we see our moms in handcuffs along with everyone else there as the cops come in and take each of us out. This later happened to my cousin again with his mom, but glad to say she is sober and they're doing much better. Twice. Left anonymous tips, which I know are hard to follow up for such a strange child protection agency, but as a pot dealer it was all I felt I could do. I found out later one of the kids was put into foster care, adopted by the foster parents, and recently graduated at trade school. I have no idea about the other kids, siblings, but I hope they made it too. Kids should be protected. Humans only get one childhood. Let's let kids enjoy it and grow to happy adults. Don't hurt them intentionally or by your own stupidity. That also means washing your hands, people. I'm a mom and I don't know why I read this thread, but I'm about to go snuggle my son and try to forget that this exists. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.